Good evening. If you are watching this, it's because I am asleep, because I am on owl shift. Welcome to Hannah House. This year I read 16 books. Let's head inside so we can talk about them. Here we are in Hannah's entryway. Here we will talk about the Match Trilogy by Allie Condie. The Match Trilogy is set in a dystopian America where the governing body, the society, controls every aspect of its citizens' lives. Kasha Reyes is our main character, and she is matched with one of her, kind of childhood friends by mistake, and the mistake is later fixed and she's matched with her, actual best friend. But because of the mistake, she no longer sees the society as a perfect group. Instead, she feels confused because she previously believed that the society was perfect, and so now she has a lot of distrust in her heart. For some personal backstory on the books, I actually read them in middle school. They came out in 2011, 2012, and 2013. Before rereading them, the only thing that I really remembered was that the author featured a lot of poetry in them, and it was my first introduction to Dylan Thomas with his poem, "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night." Poetry is actually a really big theme in the books. The society has taken that and other forms of artistic expression away from its citizens. Everybody is only allowed to consume the same 100 poems, 100 songs, 100 movies, so on and so forth. And so when Kasha learns of poetry that isn't the same 100 poems she's known her entire life, she's super drawn to it and she loves it. A non-insignificant amount of the book is Kasha finding a poem, memorizing it, and then repeating it over and over again. I found it really interesting how poetry was such a big theme in this book, but the main character is not a poet herself. She just parrots other poems constantly. The trilogy was fine. I ended up giving it 4 stars, so I guess they are a bit better than fine. They were definitely written for a middle grade audience, but I didn't necessarily mind that because I knew it going in, because I did originally read it in middle school. There were a lot of twists that were unexpected but not completely implausible, which I appreciated. The biggest downfall for me was the ending of the 3rd book. In order to give everyone a happy ending, Allie Condie just paired every character off whether it made sense for them to or not. Spoiler alert, one character's husband died very recently, and by the end of the series, they put her into just a different committed relationship with another guy. And I hated it so much because I really liked the husband character. I was sad that he died, and he was cooler than the guy that she ends up with. It was just so weird to me that, no happy endings could happen if the character was single. But I digress. The ending was fine for all intents and purposes. If you want a middle grade dystopian fiction, I'd definitely give it a read. Alright, I'll meet you in the kitchen for the next series. Wow, Hannah, I love what you've done with the place. I like this light, and this fridge, and all of your other kitchen appliances. Very cool! The next series I read in 2024 is called The Secret Circle by L.J. Smith. Similar to the Match Trilogy, I read these books because of the media I consumed when I was in middle school. In this case, it was a TV series by the same name that came out in 2011. It was canceled after 1 season in 2012. When I first started reading The Initiation, I was disappointed because there were very few similarities between the TV series and the books. In fact, I think one of the only things in common between them were the characters' names. Not necessarily the characters' personalities or relationships or motivations, but just some characters had the same names. The differences ended up being great because the books obviously were so much better than the TV series. Our main character is Cassie Blake. She and her mother have to move back into her mother's childhood home in New Salem, Massachusetts because her mother has fallen ill and they need Cassie's grandma, her mom's mom, to take care of her. At Cassie's new school, she is at first just a normal outcast because all of the kids grew up together. But within like a day, the popular kids begin to bully her. And they are so mean. Like, I spent a majority of the first book just feeling so bad for the main character because she is relentlessly bullied. By the end of the first week at school, one of the main popular girls tries to straight up murder Cassie. She tricks her into coming into an abandoned building and sets her on fire. Luckily, Cassie is saved by one of the other popular kids, and the two end up becoming best friends. After the first week, Cassie finds out that that group of popular kids all live on the same street that she now lives on. And they are all, including her, witches in a coven that is called the Secret Circle. The main conflict in this trilogy is that there's some sort of evil entity that is targeting members of the circle and their families. Like, family members are being killed. And somehow, this takes a backseat to the strangest romance. Cassie falls in love with this boy before like really knowing who he is, and then she finds out that he is her new best friend's boyfriend. And then the book focuses seemingly way more on this relationship, the like will they, won't they, but also they shouldn't because he is in a committed relationship to her best friend. And there are still murders and like threats happening, and then they're like, oh no, what are they gonna do? I understand it's from the perspective of Cassie, and she's not really attached to these murders. She doesn't know these people, but like, bro, you cannot just constantly feel bad because you're in love with your best friend's boyfriend. It's strange. Think about the people that are dying. And I'm sure you guys are all wondering, how does this relationship conflict get solved? And spoiler alert, at the end of the series, the best friend is just like, you know what? You guys are destined to be together. I think you should go for it. Because she's just like the most kind-hearted person. And she just isn't mad at all. And in fact, the three of them remain like best friends. The romance is cringy, but in an awkward high school way, so it makes sense. It's just a little painful to read through. I perhaps recommend this book if you don't mind YA and are okay with cringing a lot. Like the Matched trilogy, I ranked all three of these books together as if they were one book. I truly cannot tell you the difference between any of these books. I think each one picked up immediately where the previous one had left off, to the point where they were still in the same scene. With the Match trilogy, it at least felt like each book was one distinct arc of an overarching story, where this one, it was just a continuous blend. The only reason I can think of why L.J. Smith would do this is because with 3 books, you get triple the sales. My final ranking of the series was 4 stars. Okay, I'll meet you guys in the bathroom for the next books. Welcome to what I think is Hannah's downstairs bathroom, but I can't totally tell from the Zillow listing. Please let me know in the comments if I got it right. It is Carve the Mark by Veronica Roth. I read this book because it was available for immediate download on the Libby app, and I really wanted to go for a walk. I really enjoyed the world building in this book. It's all about these different nations that are on different planets, and they are all at war with each other. This was really refreshing compared to the last 6 books that I read that were all from the perspective of a teenager who was having some sort of relationship drama. We actually have 2 main characters in this book. Their names are Akos Karaseth and Sira Noavek. In this series, all royals or like noble families, I guess, get a gift bestowed upon them when they reach some certain age. Sira's gift, if you can call it that, is that she feels constant pain all over her whole body, and to others this looks like shadows that kind of swim around her figure. And she is unfortunately used as a weapon because if she touches people, the pain transfers from her to them, and so she has to torture someone in order to get any relief from the pain. Akos's gift is that he can interrupt the like magic force that fuels everyone else's gift, and so when he touches someone, their gift becomes completely inactive. Akos and Sira are paired up together because he is able to use his gift to stop her gift from hurting her. The only issue is that Akos is kidnapped by Sira's family in order to facilitate this. Despite this little kidnapping thing, as time goes on, the two actually become good friends because Sira likes that he takes away her pain, and Akos sees that Sira is also a victim to her family. Something about me is that I really hate the fated mates or fated tropes in general. I think that it's a real disservice to any character development and any relationships that have been built up, because if it's all just due to fate, then literally nothing that we have done matters. In this book, they did have fates, but it wasn't in the, in my opinion, bad tropey way, but rather more open-ended, vague fates. So we know vaguely where each character is going to end up, but we don't know exactly how they're going to get there or how the fate will be interpreted. I once again gave a book a 4-star ranking. I am 7 for 7 on the 4-star rankings. I'd recommend this book if you want a political fantasy novel that isn't high fantasy and is a little sci-fi. The next book I read was right after I got my Kindle, and now we are entering our era of free Kindle books. The first book I read in my free Kindle books era is The Butterfly Garden by Hutchison. This was such a wild read. It was so completely unbelievable, but once I allowed myself to get lost in this story, I actually thought it was really fun, which is horrible to say that this was fun if you knew anything about the book. The way the story is told is super interesting because we start in present day, and our main character, Maya, also known as Inara, is giving flashbacks to an FBI agent about this trauma that she and a bunch of other people have lived through. Basically, she was kidnapped with 30 to 40 other girls by a millionaire and his insane son. The millionaire and his son store all of these people in the middle of their garden. The dad and the son store these kidnapped girls in the middle of their estate's ginormous garden, and the dad will tattoo a set of butterfly wings on the back of every girl, and then he just keeps them, and he calls them his butterflies, and they exist in his butterfly garden. This was such an insane concept, because in what world are a guy and his son kidnapping generations of girls and keeping them in a garden, and the mom and the other brother never find out? That is insane. Even though this was such a wild concept, I really found myself feeling for and rooting for each character and genuinely feeling sad when the evil millionaire man eventually would kill one of them. And so I ended up liking the book. I ended up giving it 3.75 stars, so I finally broke my 4-star streak. But I did really like it. I would recommend this book if you want an insane horror. My next free Kindle read was called Room for Rent by Noelle W. Ihli, and it followed the horror theme. This book was almost my favorite for the year, but it ended up coming in 3rd place, I think. This book follows Naya, who is an extremely broke college student who is living in a very run-down college house with her very strange roommate. Throughout the book, there's a lot of weird situations, and Naya suspects that something is coming into her room at night and going through all of her things. I thought I knew what was happening the whole time, and thought the book was kind of lame because it was so predictable, but then the ending was revealed, and I was so genuinely shocked, and that's what made me like this book so much. And so I ended up ranking it 4.5 stars, which is much higher than the rest of them so far. The next Kindle free find was called The Bookstore Sisters. I read this book basically by mistake. I had completely misunderstood what the concept of the book was and misread the page length, and so I didn't enjoy this book at all because I kept waiting for the plot to start. The book was so boring to me, especially after the plot that I made up in my head, and I don't really like things that aren't horror or fantasy, so this book just really wasn't for me. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I would have given it lower, but it wasn't the book's fault that I read it. It was my mistake for reading something that I was not interested in. It's not that there was something wrong with the book. I just don't like that type of novel. So, 3.5 stars. I will meet you in the unseasonably warm yard of Hannah's house for my favorite book of the year. Wow, I love how sunny Hannah's yard is, even though it's January. My favorite book of the year was The Watchers by A.M. Shine. This was such a good book, and it kept me on the edge of my seat almost the whole time. And I'm not normally one to feel a little afraid when reading a horror book of any sort, but there were times when I would be leaving work and it was dark out, and I'd listen to this book in my car, and I would be like, oh, I'm alone in the dark, and now I'm a little scared. The concept is so interesting. A girl, Mina, and some others are trapped in the woods by a group known as the Watchers. None of the characters have ever seen the Watchers, but as the name would suggest, the Watchers have seen them. I really enjoyed this book, even though the twist ending I found to be a little predictable, but I think that's just because A.M. Shine foreshadowed very heavily, which isn't necessarily bad, it's just not something I normally look for in a book. I just genuinely loved every second of reading this book. If you like horror books, I'd highly recommend. I obviously rated this one 5 stars. So The Insatiable Volt Sisters by Rachel Eve Moulton was strange. The author just had a lot of ideas, and I don't think they all worked that well together. The book is really about the two sisters, Bibi and Henry, but it has 4 narrators, which makes it overly confusing, because 2 of the main characters don't feel like main characters. Even though we have so many narrators, most of the questions don't get answered for the reader until like the end of the book, if they get answered at all. I'm still not sure I truly understand what went on in this book. It started off very fiction, non-fantasy, but then as the story progressed, there were more and more fantasy elements involved, which I think is fine. I think that's like a pretty standard format, but it goes so off the rails in the last couple chapters that I don't know what happened. It's so confusing. Spoiler alert, my best guess at what happened is that one of the sisters' ancestors made a deal with a devil, and now all of his descendants are evil mermaids that eat people? I also really didn't like one of the 4 narrators, and I felt like karma never really came for her. No matter what bad decision she made, somebody always got her out of it, which was so frustrating to me. I really thought at some point, when everybody found out all the bad things that she had done, they would be mad at her. But instead they're just like, oh, you. I think that if the author would have split it into 2 books, then it would have given her more time to really explore the story and explain it, but she did not. So I'm rating it 3.5 stars, which is higher than it probably should be, but it was interesting. It just was disappointing. Now, if you'll join me back in the house, I can get back to more bad Kindle reads. Hello, I think this is Hannah's upstairs guest bedroom. Let me know in the comments if I got that right. The next book I read is The High Mountain Court by A.K. Mulford. I read this one because I wanted to read a fantasy novel that didn't go completely off the rails, and found a Reddit thread from like r/fantasy books or something, and there was like 2 comments recommending this one, and it was for free, so I read it. This book takes place in a world where there's all these different courts that have fairy royalty, and below them are witches and then humans. Our main character is a witch named Remy, who used to live in the High Mountain Court, but the North Court attacked it and burned it all to the ground. And so she's just kind of like living life, trying not to be noticed by the Northerners because she really shouldn't exist, because she was supposed to die in the High Mountain Court. And she gets spotted by some fairies, and so she ends up having to go with them for various reasons. Once again, there is the fated destiny trope that I hate, because all of that character development was for nothing. I feel betrayed and hoodwinked because I thought these characters were making decisions for themselves and were like surviving against the odds, but really it was just fate the whole time. And all of the characters seemed to know that this was the fate, but none of them told each other. The plot of this book made more sense than the previous one, which isn't saying much because the previous one was absolutely insane, but I did end up giving it a higher rating for that reason. I was really just disappointed in the character relations. The ending also made me so mad that I legitimately couldn't sleep for like a couple days after, and I stopped reading all the books that I wanted to because I was so mad at this ending. I won't spoil it, but the author just set something up and then just destroyed everything, and I didn't understand why they did it. I think it was because they wanted another twist, like, in the book, but the twist was bad, and I didn't like it, and it made me mad. I would recommend this book if you like being set up for disappointment. 3.75 stars. My next bad Kindle read is Rhapsodic by Thalassa. I really liked and I really hated this book. Basically, the plot is this young girl, Callie, makes a bunch of deals with who is essentially the devil. She has gone through a lot of trauma and is very lonely, and so she makes a lot of bargains for the devil's time. I thought all of Callie's flashbacks to when she was a teenager were so wholesome and cute, because her relationship with the devil is like older brother, younger sister, or like father-daughter, and it's just really sweet moments where she's like going through all this pain and trauma, and she's making deals like with pieces of her soul so that the devil will hang out with her, and he starts being like, you poor thing. And I just thought it was a really interesting depiction of the devil to like gain empathy while like caring for this child. But let me just say, the vibes go so absolutely rancid when Callie gets older. The plot turns very gross, and there is a lot of themes of grooming, even though the author tries to get around this by making Callie mature for her age, and the devil characters stay away from her for 7 years while she's growing up. However, and I will spoil this because I don't believe anybody should read this book, they end up being fated soulmates. Again, it's so gross. Like, you are a king and an adult, and you met her when she was 15 years old. Like, what do you mean you've been in love with her the whole time? What are you talking about? I gave this 3.25 stars, which is probably higher than I should, but only because I really, really loved all the parts up until the devil guy was like, I've been in love with you since we first met. Their initial relationship was so cute and so wholesome and so pure and just like such a fun characterization, and then the author ruined it, and it's so gross. This book also felt like a betrayal because I kept giving the author the benefit of the doubt. I truly did not believe that she was going to make such a gross couple, the like fated couple, but it burned me in the end. It's so gross, and this is a series, so 3.25 stars. We will be taking a short break from Hannah probably upstairs bathroom to go back into the kitchen so we can talk about an actual good book. Hello, other side of the kitchen, Erin here to tell you about the book Threads That Bind by Kika Hatzopoulou. Our main character is a young girl named Ihli, and she is one of 3 sisters, and they are descendants of the Fates from Greek mythology. So the 3 of them can see life threads, love threads, threads of all kinds, and Ihli's specific power that her sisters don't have is that she's a cutter, which means she can take one of her threads and cut somebody else's with it. I really, really liked this book, and I am really liking the sequel. The basic plot is that Ihli is a private detective, but Io's life kind of gets flipped around when she comes into contact with somebody whose life thread is severed, but they can still walk around and talk. And murder people. She ends up teaming up with this guy named Ihli to try to get to the bottom of this. And this is where it'll surprise you that I really like this book, because Io and Ihli share a fate thread. I know. But it's not necessarily like a romance fate thread, which I appreciate. And because Io is a cutter, she can cut the thread at any time she wants. And she extends that offer to Ihli and is like, I'll cut the thread, dude. I'll do it. And so they both have like a say in this fate. It's just sort of like a predestined relationship of some variety. Like in Carve the Mark, I appreciated that the fates were kind of open-ended. I liked that it felt like the characters' decisions actually mattered. Overall, I rated this book 4.75 stars, and I am so excited to finish reading the sequel. Now we can go back to Hannah's probably upstairs bathroom to review the final book that I read in 2024. The final book of 2024 was unfortunately a free Kindle book. It is The City of Gods and Monsters by Kayla Edwards. This book is narrated by two main characters. Their names are Lauren Calla and Darian Castle. Lauren is an incredibly average human girl. Her adoptive sister is her best friend. The two of them and their third best friend are out at a nightclub, and when they try to go home, Lauren is almost kidnapped, but instead the kidnappers take the third best friend. Darian comes into the picture because he is a gang leader, I guess, and his gang has been tasked with finding and kidnapping Lauren. So he does, and he finds Lauren, but he's like, you are so overwhelmingly ordinary, I do not know why anybody would want you. So maybe there's more to this than meets the eye. And Lauren is like, yeah, dude, I know. I'm so confused why people keep trying to kidnap me. I think that the real only character development is Lauren being like, maybe I'm not ordinary. And Darian being like, maybe I will be more ordinary. I don't really care about any of the characters, so I don't think reading the rest of the series will give me anything that I'm looking for. And so I'm just good with reading the first book and leaving the series. 4 stars. I'll meet you back outside for the video wrap-up. Man, it was so great hanging out with you guys at Hannah's house. I hope that everybody liked my presentation. Let me know in the comments below if I guessed where those bathrooms were correctly. See ya at work!